Well, thank you for coming here today. You've said pretty much everything, so I'm just going to skip this one. I just wanted to show again a little bit. This is my office, so I was talking about that before, but this is what I love. I love toys, and I have lots of them. So normally I always give a talk and I bring some of them to play with, but like I couldn't bring enough in my case, so I just brought one actually today that I'm going to make it pass. I'm going to start with you, so you can just pass it around. So this is what it looks like. So while you see the image, where am I going to sit actually? This is not, I don't like this desk there. I'm going to go there. Is that all right? Everybody can see. So while this is a little rock, you're going to see it, you're going to have it in your hand, and while you're looking at it as well, I want you to think about what is this function? Well, is there some kind of function to this little rock there? And if you look at it, there seems to be something, right? It has a certain shape. There is a little hole in the middle there, if you can see it around. So it seems to have some kind of purpose, maybe. So don't really know, but I would probably place my thumb just right in the middle. I think some of you have done it. Did you? So what it is, it's actually a thumb stone, so it's made for that. So I bought it like in a little shop, like in Glastonbury. I don't know if you know the Glastonbury Festival. It's a sort of like a rock festival, and there is lots of hippies, and they love rocks because it brings like loves and stuff like that. So anyway, this rock is for distressing. So you put it in your pocket, you put your thumb, and you just stroke it like that, and it's supposed to relieve the stress. So why am I showing that? Like, maybe if you have exam, you can have one, but like, I don't know if it really works. I thought it's a great example of a notion that you might know already, which is the notion of affordance. Is it something familiar for everybody? Okay, so briefly, this is the quality of an object to tell us how to use it and how we can use it in a better way. So here, particularly, we've seen that, okay, we have a shape, it fits in the hand, there is a little hole in the middle, so we kind of guess, we made some connection in our brain, and we sort of feel like how body can fit into it. And this is done by the signifier, so we have the shape, or sometimes some haptic feature that help us to figure out what I'm supposed to do with this object. So this is another toy that I bring sometimes. It's this demonstration of how we can have also haptic feature. So it's sort of like it's a puzzle where you have a little ball here and you can press it and they go under, and you have to match the color. So you have to put the orange there and the blue in the blue circle and so on. So when you see it, you don't really sort of maybe realize that you can push them under, but as soon as you take it in your hand, you can feel like, you know, the ball can do something. So as you push it, it follows some grooves under. So you kind of feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. So by just not looking at it, but by manipulating, you can figure out that there is something you can do with this object. So affordance is pretty much everywhere around us. For example, doors, handles. So you can figure out like what kind of action you should do. You should push or pull. Chairs to sit. And I have this one. So this is a strange one. This is a cup. Plastic cup. Anybody sort of can guess why it's like that? Why it has a conic bottom? Any idea?
To hold it.
To hold it, but what can you not do with it? You can put it on the table. So it's sufficiently what I would say afford to throw me away. You can't put it on the table. So if you finish, you're probably going to put it on a trash can. It's actually used in hospital setups, so it's to avoid transmission of germs. So you have to throw it away. You can't just leave it on the table. This is quite a nice example. Another example, or keyboard, you might have a computer with like the keys that are slightly curved in the middle. So it's when you touch typing, you kind of feel like if you drift away, you can sort of come back to the middle of the keys because you feel there's like a little hole in it. Lighter, maybe if there is any smoker. I'm an ex-smoker, and I thought the lighter is great because you start rolling there, and you just arrive just in place to trigger the light. And while I was looking for more example of affordance, I thought it's even in nature. So if you think about a banana and I put it there, but there is also this part there, which is quite soft and sort of like invite, open me. I found that clementine, it's sort of maybe afford, share me. And some others, I'm not so sure. Here is another example, and we're going to make a little quiz. So this is my car. I don't know if you can see that. It's okay? Yeah. So one day I arrive at work, and I realize that the light ceiling is still on. So I'm like, okay. So I'm starting looking around the top, and I can't find the switch at all. So I'm like, okay, and what am I supposed to do? There was no more contact in the car, nothing. So what I did, like everybody in the world today, I Googled it. And I found lots of answers, actually, like of people, where is the switch? And the Google answers say it's on the right of the wheel. So we're going to go there. Oh, crash. Great. I thought that would happen at some point. Let's put it back. It did not like this video. It has to happen. Where is it? Can we see it back there? Is it just a video that he doesn't like? Oh, no, it's all right. Let me put it back. Yeah. So here it is on the right of the wheel. This is what I found here. Okay, so let's do a quiz. Where is this button? What would you press to turn this damn light off here? Any idea?
Is it the 0 on the bottom there?
This one there?
Yeah.
Yeah, try that. It doesn't do anything. Maybe some ventilation. Yeah?
I don't think any of those, because those are your headlights. That's your full.
Yeah.
And on the right there, that's just your speedometer light.
Yeah.
I don't think any of those.
I thought the same. I thought that it's not there. I actually tried to do this one, and it does the external light.
Yeah.
And I tried, if you would have tried this one, there is one with nothing. It's a fake button. It doesn't actually trigger anything.
Full light, though.
Yeah.
Should be full, but okay.
Did you have an idea?
Is the dial also a button?
Yes. And this is the thing. So this is how you're supposed to turn it off. You're going to see it. Turn off. And I actually discovered it because in some point I was so desperate that I was stroking my car, and eventually it's triggered. I was like, oh, wow, that's great. So here I think is typically an example of a bad affordance. Essentially we have a shape which for us means turn in, but doesn't really mean pushing. So we have to sort of guess what's going on, and it's not quite natural.
Well, there was no indication that you should push.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean,
So essentially there's a lack of signifier. And the signifier could be in the shape, so clearly there the shape is not a button, or you can just do some signifiers that are more cognitively demanding, maybe by just writing something,
Right.
just push me or something. That would also be a way.
Maybe we're used to the fact that things have one purpose. Oh, we just turn
Yeah.
the dial, we don't actually push it.
Yeah, that's a good
I know
point
that in
actually.
some radios and cars, you do push the power button and
Yeah.
turn the dial. So.
Yeah. So it's also linked to sort of our knowledge of how things work in the way we used to sort of buttons behaving in some way. Okay, so shape guides functionality pretty much everywhere around us in the world we have surrounding us. And there was one type of object that resists to this notion of affordance and shape to help, like, manipulating things. And it's our phones, or interactive device, or computer, or tablet, anything. It's just like static. It's rigid. It's just a brick. That's what I say. It's like a brick. And you can say maybe there is so many applications on those. Maybe that's why you need sort of universal shape so that you can play game, you can write emails, you can do anything on there. It's a brick. It's okay. But it's not good. And I think, like, I don't know, whoever play games on his phone or tablet, I don't know if you ever feel like you just lack control. It's not nice to grasp, or maybe sometimes it requires eyes-free interaction. You cannot actually feel the buttons. You sort of drift away, and it doesn't click or something. So it's here the shape clearly doesn't help us with the function there, the action that we're doing. So this is what I think, like in my research. I think interactive device should afford more. This is a made-up word, but they should have shape that help us with doing some task. The tasks they are made for that. So I think that next interactive device will be no longer rectangular. There will be touchscreen all around. So for example, have example here, device of arbitrary shapes. touchscreens all around that can be squeezed, twist, bent, and that can also shapeshift on their own. So I always have this vision of how it could be in the future. You can imagine like kids going on the app stores and downloading an application like a game, and the game knows how to reshape the phone, maybe popping up some joystick or just changing the way you can grasp it so that you can play the game in full interaction, rich interaction way. So great. So good mission for now. Like it's maybe a little bit sci-fi. Is it really actually going to happen? So obviously the big question we have to answer is how to do this. How are we going to do this? And maybe the foremost question is how are we going to build those things? So a few things that I do in my research is to look at origami. I think I was talking earlier about that. I love origami because it's essentially the oldest art of shape. And you can do so many things with origami. The first type we call surfacing. So this is it. So you have a piece of paper, you have some folding patterns, and you sort of magically appear with like a bunny. I don't know how this one was made, but certainly like patience, I don't know, but like I think this is definitely requiring some patience to do that properly. And you can do great things with this kind of origami. So this is a structure we call Mira. Don't know how to pronounce it, Mira, I think. And you can see here, you can really clearly from a single piece of paper do something that is quite flexible and interesting in the shape. And I don't know if we see much, but this is some of my first work that I did around like how we can adapt origami into interactive device. Maybe, I don't know if we can turn off this one. Is that better? Not too much. Well, what you can normally see is essentially I'm going to put this picture. So we use some wood. We created this little structure in which we how do you pronounce that? So some shape memory alloys. So shape memory alloy is like a metal that can change shapes. So here it's actually shrinking. So whenever you heat it, it shrinks, and by shrinking it, it just like flap two pieces of wood together. And we did this like on sort of like a bit bigger things to simulate how a phone can be. So we are using projection and tracking to simulate the display. So folding is great, but like if we start to have like, especially like we simulated with display and sensing, but if you start to have component in there, like folding is definitely not going to work. So we looked at other kind of origami. Some of them are called volumetric origami or modular origami. This is sort of represented here. So instead of going from a piece of paper to a shape, you go from a piece of paper to some modules. The modules reconfiguring into another shape. And you can do some pretty cool things with that. It's very used as well in the robotic field, if some of you are familiar with that. So this is one of the work we've done that take this inspiration. It's called Cubimorph. And it was actually published in a robotic conference because it's sort of very, very close as well from the robotic world. So we take the approach of going from a phone made of little blocks that we configure into, for example, a console. And I'm not going to go too much in detail, but if you want to have questions at the end, I'm happy to do it. But essentially what we try to do is we try to make it like for end users. So we thought about how can we embed screen on the side, how can we embed sensors, and what does it mean in terms of algorithm, the actual algorithm behind. So briefly, this is how it works. So you have a little turntable mechanism in the middle that will configure the inch in the appropriate position. And obviously, as I didn't bring it, it's quite big. But like, if maybe in the future we can sort of miniaturize that to have like some smaller cubes. And I'm going to switch the algorithm. This is another work that is going to be presented at CHI. Anybody is going to CHI this year, actually? Yeah, so you might see that like, quite some people actually, so you might see that at CHI. This is the concept of having a slider. So here you have a slider, like for controlling, I don't know, sounds and music or whatever. and it reconfigures into a knob. So you can essentially have the two functionalities in one device, but it's also use this modular approach, having little bits connected and reconfiguring into different shapes. So, that's sort of like look into handheld device or input device. I also work on other form factors. So for example, this is a work we published at Interact, which look at shape changing into astronaut gloves. I'm going to put the video. So essentially, like, we made this prototype, totally ready to go to Mars. Not really. Where when you touch something, essentially it either transmits or not the shape to the finger of the astronaut inside. So it used a little layer of jamming that I'm going to present in a minute, like if some of you know. But essentially it's the idea of like when you, don't know if you ski, have you skied before, or I mean, I guess here it's so cold, you might have glove, quite thick glove, like in the winter. Whenever you try to touch something, it's just impossible. And then doing some little small task is really hard. So it's essentially here is trying to bring back some haptic sensation to the astronaut. And this is another adaptation of sort of similar technology, but for like an entire suit. And here we use it like, I don't have a video, but it's the context of imagine you're playing a game where an enemy throws you, and you have this suit with like on the limb, these patches that can change stiffness, so it can become like really rigid. So whenever the enemy is freezing you, you can't move your leg. So you actually feel what the game is doing. And this is how jammings work. So for those who don't know, this is not my work. This is just a video from the MIT, which is pretty cool. But it's essentially it's vacuum packing. So if you buy a pack of coffee, you know, when you buy it, it's very, very hard, and as soon as you open it, it's become really soft. So it's really essentially using the same principle. And you can do tables. It's quite nice. Cool, so this is a little bit of an overview of like what I do within my team in terms of hardware. Now let's assume like we are on track, there are things happening, there are things in other fields as well. In terms of content, of what's happening in terms of user interface for this device that change shape, there is really not much. We are not ready to go to this vision. So if you think about it, interfaces are rectangular, you know, on your desktop or on your phone. It has been rectangular since a long time. It's quite surprising because maybe before the computer, we used to have lots of different other form of displays, for example, in faces, even I think like some of the drawing from the Middle Age were done on ovals. So why is it that we have rectangle? Well, essentially, and to sort of simplify it, it comes from the movie industry. So when the first movie were created, they were done on this, they were printed on this perforated strip, which were rectangular. So we essentially adapted the TV to match those strips. It's quite funny because the TV, if some of you know how cathode ray tubes work, it would have been easier to make it as circles, really, because it's like a electron beam shooting. So it's actually easier, would have been maybe easier to do it in a circle. But we went rectangular because of the format behind. And today, now, everything is rectangular. So we can wonder what's going to happen if we have all these shape-changing devices to the interface. So for example, we have some scenario we envision where you're in the street, you have signage with words, or maybe you're cooking something and the recipe is happening under your, how do you call that, like, what's a cooking top? Like, yeah. So you have holes in the middle, like how do you work around holes? You can have things like that, and so on. So one part of the work I'm doing as well is demonstrated here, where we essentially try to look at how can we change the interface when it's not going to be a rectangle anymore. So we do a lot of user experiment in which we change, for example, the text, how the text is displayed. So we try different layout, and we try to understand how this impacts readability, for example. So this is one of the work we've done, but we also look at web design. So if you have a web page and you have to put it in a triangle, how would it work exactly, and how would it impact some factors such as readability or also aesthetic. Do we find it actually nice to look at? And so on. So again, like lots of things to present, but like if you want me to go in more detail, you can ask me at the end. So what time is it now? I have an hour, is it? What time is it? 30?
10:50.
Okay. So they offer this give you a little bit of an idea of what my research is. So you might know, is anybody like sort of HCI here, or is there some non-HCI? Okay, so, sorry? No? Okay, so basically like, I'm sort of, maybe this is familiar for the HCI people, but like what we're doing, we have this 3 hats where we evaluate new technology, we learn something about users that can help us designing new interface, and then we sort of prototype or implement. So we have this nice like 3 hat things with knowing about experimental psychology, knowing about design, and computer science, where the HC and I are coming from, which some of you might know already. So now for the last part of this talk, I want to talk about HCI essentially. I want to talk why the C in HCI is obsolete, and what I want to do about it. And to do that, we're going to do a little quiz. So I'm going to show you some picture here, which first one, and you're going to tell me if you think this is a computer. Okay, so what about this one? Is this a computer? It's not a computer. Okay, unanimity. What about this? Tony Stark, is it Tony Stark in Iron Man? Is it a computer that is manipulating here? Oh, yeah, not? Okay. What about a car? Computer? Wow, okay, not a computer. Wow, you're good. What about this one? Computer? Not computer. Ah, we have some people who have like, we can have some debates. Yeah, it's in the middle, okay. So yeah, so sort of like through this game, I want to sort of show you that today computers have many, many shapes, and like, if we want to sort of just describe computer, it's very complex, this definition, but maybe it's just sort of like an object or a device that is capable of receiving information and that can also deliver information. It can have so many forms. If you ask someone from the 60s, this is what a computer looked like a room full of huge shelves and wires. If you ask for someone in the 80s, that would be this, like a box on a computer with a keyboard and a mouse. And actually, this form of computer was therefore long before what we are in today, and it was quite stable. So if you think about it, it's essentially a box with a screen, keyboard, mouse sitting on a desk with a human facing it. And this is where people was like, aha, there is a human in front. So if we want to design good computer, we essentially need to understand about human first. And this is sort of like how started the field of HCI. So this is the picture of the first Sky conference in '83, where people realized that to build efficient computer, we just don't need computer science, we also need experimental psychology and design. But now that we have all these things, and that I made you this game to essentially show that computers now are not this box sitting on the computer, it's much more. So this is like, I did not make that to you today, but like this is a game that I generally like to do in this talk, which is asking for people to draw computers. And I did that with my department of computer science, like a couple of months ago. And this is what people drew. So these are definitely like a box on a desk. There are a few things. I think there was like humans are computer for some reason. Turing machine, but like very essentially it's sort of very, very basic computer. But like as HCI people, we know that computer is much more, right? It's all these different shapes we can have. And what it's going to be, like in 2015, 2100, computers can be everything. This chair could be a computer, right? Yeah.
I was going to say that earlier you mentioned that as a toy, and my first thought is, well, what makes that a toy, right? You said it's kind of maybe stress relief. And so
Yeah.
it's a toy from a certain point of view, but for someone else's point of view, it's just
A tool. It could be a tool. Yeah.
So that kind of parallels with what our view is of what a computer is,
Mm-hmm.
that's expanding to incorporate what we think a computer could be.
Yeah. So I think it's like everything is a way in which human interacting with something could have an interest for an HCI researcher in some way. In my point of view, I mean, maybe some people have more restricted vision, I don't know. But yeah, so it's sort of like if even now, like there is like a little bit of a weak boundary between things, like what is it going to be in 100 years, right? It's going to be crazy if we think about all the devices we can have around us, right? So that's why I'm thinking, can we not say human things interaction? But like this is obviously like very terrible name. So that's why I kind of like to call it interactive metamaterial. It's a bit of a buzzword, metamaterial maybe, but like this is a material that is man-made and that interact with users. So this is sort of like a term that like me and my team were trying to push up as sort of a new kind of field. And why is that? Is because if computers have any shape that we can possibly imagine, then we need the whole field of HCI, in my point of view, need a profound rethinking about how do we do things. And I like to use the analogy of the car industry. So the car industry before the World War II, it was pretty much like a question of gut feeling. So we have wheels, we have motors, let's put that together, let's put a roof on the top. So it's sort of an ingenious invention plus gut feeling, and then, bam, we have a car, we have something that moves. And then came, simulation, fluid dynamics, wind tunnels. And now if we look at the automotive industry, there is a very rigorous process from the thinking of like, I want to make a car, and the actual car. And you don't just build a car like and try again, and you have like some very rigorous process that make you sure that the car is going to be aerodynamic at the end. So my thinking is that, so you have, again, like that's what I just say, you have lots of tools to build those cars, to build those planes. So my thinking is that, actually it's after, but like we should have the same similar of tool for the building of interactive device or maybe interactive metamaterial, where we should really think about embedding human models within it and sort of maybe providing tool for people to actually build them without having, and I'm sure some of you might have spent so many time in lab to build things, it doesn't work, you try again, it doesn't work, and then you spend like lots of time to actually build those things. So could we have some tools that can help us with designing interactive device? So this is like the sort of last axis that I'm doing in my research, and I want to show you a few of the projects we're doing. This is actually a very old work, I don't know, 5 years ago. This is a sort of like a little platform to test how people are pointing on curved surface. So right now we just know how people are touching on our touchscreens, but what if we have touchscreen of different shape? So this is a device, I have a video there of how can we create it so that we can actually study touch on different shapes. It's made of Legos, I love Legos again. And it's just using FTIR for those who knows. So you can actually use that to already do some experimentation on how we can touch on curved surface and get some information that can later be used by designer, for example. This is another work which is more related. So this one before was on touch, how to understand touch. Here is how to understand display. And obviously we don't have display that are able to, have different shapes. So if we can prototype some of them. So this is, oops, sorry. No, I need to go back once more. So this is going to be presented at KIND this year as well as a late working work. So it's essentially like how can we prototype display? So it's using the Magna Doodle. Have you ever played with that before? It's like little surface that you have a magnetic pen and you can, as a kid, I think everybody has that. So what we essentially did is we used that. So this is like a magnetophoretic surface with little like flakes of metal in there that are attracted to a magnet. And we have a row of electromagnets. So whenever we swipe it on something, it can create a display. So we essentially, obviously it's very low fidelity, but we can sort of, if you have any kind of shape under, you can sort of create a rectangular display on anywhere. Low fidelity, of course. This is another way to also create like shape-changing devices when we don't have the technology yet. This is a work that we submitted to US, so it's not accepted yet anyway, but I still want to show you. So it's with what we call Morph Bench. So it's using projection mapping to simulate shape-changing devices. So we have these two projectors, we have an object in the middle, the user places a certain position or head tracked, and we can sort of create different visual on the object to simulate that it changed shape. So we create the illusion that it's changing shape. So here, for example, like these cubes becoming hollows, and they're actually it is actually quite good. I mean, like, I don't have the demo, but like you can actually feel like, oh wow, there's something happening there. So you're so fooled by your senses. Obviously, you cannot do everything. You can't touch it, but it's already maybe a way to, try to evaluate like affordance. What if something's changed shape in a certain way? How would we react to it? So we did also a little studies in which we figure out how different change of shape would affect emotion in people. Like how would it affect the negativity you feel from the object? Do you want to approach it? Do you want to grab it? What do you want to do with the object? And this is another work you might have seen as well, before, but this is a reiteration. So my student is presenting at CHI another paper which is about this framework to describe shape, and we have actually provided some updated feature to it. And finally, I think that's the last one, this is like another paper that we present at CHI, and this is maybe the one, I'm excited by all the project, but this is really particularly exciting because I was able to hire, like a year and a half ago, a material scientist postdoc, and basically together we tried to look about how material science and HCI can combine their effort to create shape-changing interfaces. So what we did, actually she did like most of the work, where she did a review of how advances in material science can be used to HCI. And we have now this website, so if you're interested in that, you can have a look. And we just essentially want to use it as a tool for a designer. If you want to design something that change shape, you can go around, and we have all the different category of things you can use, and you can sort of be inspired or look at what's happening in material science and how can you adapt it maybe to HCI. And essentially, this is sort of almost finishing the talk, because maybe sort of my main motivation, my main drive in research is that we need to collaborate more with other fields. And I think all this field, like material science, HCI, robotic, even biology, needs to collaborate more, because now we're doing things that are requiring so much skills and experience that we need this multidisciplinary research. And this is a video that I really like, and this is explaining why we also need biology, which sounds a little bit weird, and I hope you're going to see it. So this is here like what you think a coral or whatever, an algal, and if you approach it a little bit, it's actually an octopus, is it? Yeah. Or is it like, what do you say, octopus? Yeah. Yeah, so it's sort of like there is a lot of thinking about, like in the robotic world of material science, about bio-inspired things. It's in some way shape-changing is us, right? We are shape-changing things, right? So can we look at how nature is made to inspire the design of our interactive device? So that's my team. So this is lots of the people I've worked with, postdocs and PhD students. As you can see, they have a lot of different background as well. And I'm part of I'm actually co-leading the bigger team, which is the Bristol Interaction Group in Bristol, where we're also doing lots of other kind of projects. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you. Any question? Yeah?
I'm actually curious about your projection on the cube study. Did you look at different shapes as well in terms of what you were projecting onto?
Yeah, so we look at 7 different effects. So for example, we look at like cubes becoming hollow, then we look at a cube becoming like with having some spike going out. I can't remember, although I actually like wrote the paper months ago, but like, yeah, there was like a bunch of different visual that we used. There is like, yeah, this cube that is turning, and we look at how, so we essentially did a elicitation, verbalization study where we asked people what their feelings are and what they think they would do, what kind of words come to their mind, like do they want to grab the object, are they afraid? I mean, like we sort of look at how they would react to such a change. Yeah.
Was there a reason you chose a cube as the shape to project upon versus, say, a sphere or a half sphere?
Yeah, well, I think like, so the paper itself proposed more the technique of using projection mapping, and then sort of we did the study to just make an example of how this could be used. We thought a lot about like what we're going to use, and we thought like, let's take a square because it's sort of very basic shape. Like we could have taken actually the square was also good, I guess, for projection. Maybe the sphere would have been a bit more difficult. So yeah, it could. I mean, it's just essentially a question of implementation behind to make the effect wow. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering if you sort of either explored through a study or just kind of through consideration of how to balance the sort of simplicity and reliability of like just a consistently shaped object versus once you're adding moving parts, the complexity and possible points of failure that can arise?
In terms of, do you mean robustness, or do you mean like in terms of like how robust is the device, or?
Yeah, or like the more moving parts you have, the more things that can inevitably physically go wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I just wonder if you have any personal opinions or you've explored how to balance those two things.
Yeah, so there is like there is a project that I'm doing at the moment, which doesn't answer to this solution exactly, but start thinking about, of course, we might have a problem, because if you think about like smartphone, actually, before the iPhone and everything, we used to have resistive touchscreens. I don't know if you remember that, but this is the kind where you would have a stylus, and if you press too much, there is like a little black dot appearing because you start essentially breaking the screen. And I think this is really interesting, actually, because this sort of give a control back to the user into how I should not make an action, otherwise going to destroy it, instead of trying to go to the approach of we're going to make a device that is like flawless and unbreakable. Maybe that if we're going to go with things that are more reconfigurable, we need to give back a little bit of control to the user. So maybe we need to make him aware, don't do that, or there you're going to bend it too much, So this is definitely something we need to think about, because as soon as we're going to have things that move shape, we can't just build something that is going to be unbreakable. Or can we? I don't know. I don't think this is feasible. So we need to think about this balance, I think.
And I guess that's kind of one of the motivations between flexible versus kind of foldable things.
Yeah.
Is a flexible, to me at least, it seems like it would have, as long as you're able to have flexible components, it would have less opportunity to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't necessarily have like spheres and things,
Yeah.
like that.
Well, but this is definitely a premise. So for example, the first video that I showed you with the origami and the shape memory alloy, so it was on 5 years ago. We demonstrated like a few times, like maybe 10 times, and then now it's completely broken. It's just because obviously we're doing low fidelity prototype as well, but like definitely we need to think about that as well. Yeah. Which is why I think it's also very important to couple the research with material scientists, for example, because this is particularly something that they look at. They have like test bench where they look at the robustness of a device, or how many times you can flex it, and so on. So this is where I think this should come. Yeah. Oh.
Maybe a too big a question for me to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
But do you have advice for those of us who would say are more on the HCI and design end of things of how we can explore and expose ourselves to all the options available in terms of the material sciences and technologies that we can explore without falling into the trap then of building devices or doing research that is an exploration of technology for technology's sake rather than human driven?
It is actually really hard. This is actually something that I'm experiencing right now. It's a very good question actually, because it's really hard to actually work with people who have very different objectives. For example, when I first hired this postdoc, which is a material scientist, and we had this discussion, and she was like, what are the requirements of the object we want to build? So like, well, we don't have requirements. We're gonna, make some user study, evaluate, put them into hand, and then do a user-centered design. And that was something that was really hard for her to understand at first. And I think that's where it's very difficult. So I don't know what would be my advice. I think this is clearly something that happens more and more within the HCI, that we look at other fields. I think it's something that needs to evolve. Maybe by trying to collaborate more like with those people and try to change the way, like the methods maybe, and try to change the way we're doing things. Maybe also like a massive problem is where we publish, because this is obviously something really hard. Like, are you going to publish to CHI, which is a conference? Like for people in material science, publishing to a conference is like ridiculous. You have to publish in journal. So there is all this there is a lot of things between the two fields that prevent like collaboration, which make things really hard. But I'm suspecting the more we try, the more it's going to evolve, and maybe we're going to have new venues or things like that going to emerge that can help foster those two things together. I went to actually a small conference on composite material last week, and there was one thing that really made me jump on my seat, because there was this girl presenting her work on like some sort of like self-healing material, and then someone asked, that's really great research, what's the application of it? And she's like, oh, I don't know yet, but it doesn't matter. And everybody was like, oh, okay. And this is like something that, I don't know, I think would never happen in a CHI. You would never have a CHI paper if you don't have an application for what you're doing. So I think it's really hard, I think, but I think it will eventually evolve. I think the more people are doing this, it will be easier with time, I think. I don't know if it answers, but like, I think we can talk more about that. I think it's a good question to think of. Yeah.
Listening to your talk, I was thinking that after modern architecture, postmodern kind of criticized rectangular shapes and stuff like that. And then biometry came, where they kind of encouraged bio-inspired design. So do you think this is going to fall into the same trend?
I don't know. I think this is something we should look at. I think it also depends. I mean, there is a lot of factors, like you need to think about what are you doing that? Are you doing for example, modern architecture is going really like, simple lines, and but is it just a trend, or maybe this is also the fact that how does it affect your emotion? And maybe sometimes this kind of shapes are good, sometimes you need some other more organic shape in some way. I think this is an open question. I think we need answers. We don't know yet. We need answers to that. And we need to understand more shapes, essentially. How can we do that? But again, like, because we don't have yet shape-changing devices that are high fidelity, how do we do that? Can we study them before some way? Yeah.
Sorry, not asking that question, but I'm wondering if you know anything about like the Nintendo Labo thing.
We were talking about that earlier.
And the movement of interactive shape-changing things for consumer products. If you think you can think of any other examples, or what do you think of that project out now?
I love this project. I definitely want to buy it anyway, just because I love toys anyway. But I think in terms of end consumer anyway, my personal opinion is that, and you're maybe aware of the maker community as well, I think we're going to also move on in the future into less centralized way of accessing to technology. So instead of having sort of like Apple and Samsung selling their things, we will be able to actually make our own device to whatever needs we have. So sort of an explosion even more about like the do-it-yourself community. So maybe this could happen in this way. You need a certain device that change shape because you do certain things and just you're going to make it with your 3D printer in some way. Don't know if that doesn't really answer, but yeah.
That kind of relates to the question, and that I'm wondering when you have this like possible future of a very large diversity of form factors that you're designing for. How do you like adapt the sort of like application development process so that you can use different devices for an application that right now, I mean, people have difficulty just designing for, all the browsers or all
Yeah.
the different mobile devices that are available.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on how to kind of like make a more flexible way for developing applications for, especially if you're going to have one person?
Yeah. So I think maybe I can answer with two things on that. As first of all is, and maybe I can put back the slide. I think I have this. Oh, that's my little boy. The other way around. This one. So that's my first answer. It's essentially. So with this work we've done by characterizing what are the shapes possible, how things can be configured. If we have that first, we can first of all look at studying those things in particular. So okay, let's say I want to understand how curvature impacts certain things, so I'm going to look at the curvature, I'm going to figure out how this impacts human factor and so on. So I'm going to build models of human interacting with curvature, and then I can look at that, and then I can look at that. So essentially, we need, I think, to build more understanding of shapes. And this could be done by just because there is infinity of shapes we can study. So can we, look down at just one aspect, trying to understand how this aspect impacts like interaction, and then build up like a more theory of shape, if you will. And maybe we'll figure out that we don't actually need to build like devices that reconfigure into any possible shape. Maybe it doesn't matter to have different 1 degree angle of curvature change. Maybe we just need like a smaller sample. And I think once we have done that, we have really an understanding of how shape impact lots of different kind of interaction. It's come back to the tools. So we need like tools that help us with that. So for example, if you are like a plane designer, automotive designer, you're going to take your CAD tool, you're going to build your shape, and you're going to simulate, and it's going to tell you, like for example, how aerodynamic is the thing. Or maybe we can have the same thing for designer. We can have like some sort of simulation tool which help with bringing all the models we know about human factors, so that you don't have to consider the whole range and shape, and you can sort of help the designer figuring out which shape are best. So AI sort of.
Yeah, like for example, Airbnb has like a kind of like simulator that they've created so that they can basically see what their app's going to look like on any device, especially because they have to work in so many different languages. So yeah, if you were to combine that with like a sort of physical simulation as well, kind of like combining that with drawing from aviation or some other automobiles.
Yeah, and it's a bit also similar with the work I've done on design guideline for website on different shape. Like we can now probably embed those guidelines into some sort of like, Photoshop augmented thing where, instead of having to place all the element or whatever API by hand, the software can sort of provide you with, this should be like that because we know it's going to help with reading, or, so you can have some essentially simulation and analysis that can help you with this process. I think this is, we need that because we can't just like do it like without any tools. I think it's too much shape to consider. Cool. Well, I'm glad we had so much questions. It's actually quite cool.
Yeah, it's a really good discussion.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming. Maybe we can give her a last round of applause.